Welcome back to Sailing El Jaleo! After slamming y'all with a bunch of really long, boring videos, I'm going to try and keep this one super short, 10 minutes or less. That's my goal. And this week I'm going to be covering the favorite project that I've done to date on El Jaleo. When I started this project, I certainly didn't expect it to be my favorite project. I actually thought it was going to kind of suck, but it turned out to be very cathartic, a very healing process for El Jaleo and I, and it gave me some time to reflect upon the first 3 years that I've spent aboard El Jaleo and some of the pitfalls that I'd found myself falling into. So I guess we might as well go ahead and get right into it. So grab a drink, climb aboard, and let's get going. In life, we cultivate all different kinds of relationships. We have relationships with our significant others. We have relationships with friends, family, co-workers, our animals. And, we even have relationships with strangers. There's kind of a social contract that says there's a range of acceptability of how you should behave towards someone else. And we expect pretty much everyone to, adhere to that. And it's kind of this rules of engagement, and relationships are very complex, and I think the deeper the relationship, obviously the higher probability that it has to turn toxic, or the higher the stakes, the more invested or the more emotional relationships that a person has can be either really great or really, really bad. It's rare that a relationship with the lowest level of relationship, with a stranger or someone you casually know, there's low probability that relationship is going to sour. But, the higher the stakes, the more emotion plays into it, and we can get carried away and things can get out of control. And especially when I was younger, my relationships with significant others always turned toxic in the end. And I bear a large responsibility for that. And, being on a boat gives you a lot of time to think. And I've come to realize in life that, as strange as it sounds, that the higher the stakes, the relationship, the more it can go bad. And I've had a lot of relationships go bad, and a lot of that was my fault. And but ultimately it does take two people to fail. And I've also realized I'll never be in a relationship with a significant other again. So the two most important relationships that I've got in my life is with El Jaleo and with my puppy dogs. And that the relationship with the puppy dogs is great. It's always great. We get along. They're my family. They're my pack. We very rarely do I ever get frustrated with the dogs. Maybe with Wiegand sometimes when she's being a little shit. But, for the most part, they're just amazing. I would be a very lonely person without my puppy dogs. So that's great. And the next greatest relationship that I have is with El Jaleo, and that might sound stupid, but if you own a boat that you live on, perhaps you'll understand what I'm talking about. And I found myself over time, especially the last, I would say, 3 to 4 months, I've found myself getting really, really frustrated with El Jaleo, and at times even cursing El Jaleo and screaming at her, and and I think it's, upon reflection, I think it's the same thing that happens when you're in a relationship with a significant other, at least in my experience. And that I had a horrible tendency to look at the negative side of everything, to look at the shortcomings of a person. And you kind of got away from why you fell in love with that person in the first place. And, he or she doesn't do this, or he or she does this, or it was a focusing on the negative instead of the positive. And I think I had a real tendency to do that in the past, and that's probably why a lot of my relationships failed. Instead of concentrating on the reasons why I fell in love with that person in the first place. And, I found myself falling out of love with El Jaleo. Now, I love being on a boat and doing all of this stuff, but it was falling out of love with some of the aspects of the boat and some of the shortcomings that El Jaleo has. I bought El Jaleo before I had ever owned a serious boat before, and so it's natural that, I didn't know everything, and there are a few things, that I wish that she had that she doesn't, like an enclosed cockpit, fully enclosed cockpit would be wonderful. There's a lot of times when you're out there and it's raining or the wind is blowing or it's just plain old cold and you wish you had a little more protection, but you don't. And she just has a bimini top, and that's the way she was designed, and that's fine. Like, that's great. And, she's a little slow, but that goes along with the territory. She's a big fat old gal, and she's built like a battle axe, and she's really wide, I think, for her size, and that means she has a ton of storage because of some of her attributes. She's got wide hips, and that's what makes her stable, that and her keel, and it gives more storage space. But you know what? It means she's a little bit slower, and and that's okay. I find myself getting in, being too much of a goal-oriented. Today when I wake up, I'm going to go 40 miles to this place, so I got to get up early because I got to get there in case something goes wrong or the conditions aren't exactly what I'm expecting or blah, blah, blah. And, I realize I think I'm realizing for the first time before this relationship fails that perhaps I can save it. And going through this woodwork or this wood project on El Jaleo has really, it's given me the time to appreciate her. When you're lying in bed with your significant other and they're asleep or falling asleep, and you just kind of rub their back, for 10 or 20 minutes, and you're not getting anything out of it, but you are, you feel good about your relationship with that other person, and the other person, may be asleep and not even realizing that you're rubbing your back, but it just kind of rekindles, some of that love that you had, or you have, or you thought maybe you lost. It claws a little bit of that back. And, El Jaleo, I had been neglecting her, and she was getting dirty, and, a couple of years of pollen building up, and that's my fault. That was me not putting the time into my relationship with El Jaleo. And she gets little nicks in her wood. I'm clumsy, so I might bang into her with something that I shouldn't, and then her finish gets scuffed, and she just started to look old. And by going through and first cleaning all of her interior woodwork, there's a lot of it, which I love, but it's a lot of maintenance. And it took a few days to go through and hand clean all of her wood surfaces, and then recoat all of her surfaces with tung oil and let it dry into a nice hard finish. And all of those little nicks and dents and scratches, wiping all of that stuff away. And when I could stand back and look at her, when she's in great shape, when she's cleaned up, when her wood has been handled with care, and, I realized why I fell in love with her in the first place. And because she is just a stunning, beautiful boat, and her list of pros way outweigh her short list of cons. But I was focusing too much on the cons, and this project, which I thought was going to be a drag, doing all this cleaning and oiling, I really thought it was going to stink. It actually really brought me back around, as stupid as it sounds, and made me fall in love with her again. And I am so looking forward to getting back out there, and I'm almost out of tung oil. I went through almost 2 quarts. on the interior, getting her back up to where she should have been all along. And I'm going to order a couple more quarts, maybe one. She won't need this deep of an oiling again for a little while. So I'm going to, those little nicks and cuts and scrapes when they first appear, I'm going to treat them right away. And I'm going to start treating her like she should have been treated all along. So, relationships, we all have to work on every relationship we have. And my relationship with Jaleo I had let it slip, and it was getting not super toxic, but it was getting a little toxic, and doing this project just made all of that go away. And it reinvigorated me, and it made me want to get back out there with her. So I'm really super looking forward to this next cruising season. I'm way optimistic. If you'd asked me a couple weeks ago how stoked I was about it, I was stoked, but not nearly to the level that I am now. So, if you have a relationship that's struggling, maybe put a little oil on it and see if it doesn't help. And that's all we have time for this week. I would like to give a massive shout out to my Patreon crew. Without your guys' support, I would not make these videos. And my Patreon crew is Joan and Juddy Judnick, Val and Chris Alcorn, Denise and Eli Sackett, Sherry Erickson, Deb Shaw, and Matthew Spadden. Thank you guys so very much. Your support really does mean the world to me. If you are interested in joining our Patreon crew, there is a link in the description down below, and that'll take you to our Patreon page where there are hundreds of videos and photos, and you can sign up to get access to all that, and it'll give you real-time updates about what's going on and where we're at and all of that. And you'd help support the channel, which would be awesome. If you do like our videos, please like, comment, and subscribe. That doesn't cost you anything, but it helps us out tremendously. So we would appreciate that. And I hope you all are well, and we'll see you next week.